Well, coming up on today's show, the Hyundai Kona gets a different powertrain spec for the US market, Mazda starts to talk about electric vehicles, and more Tesla Model 3 configurators are opening up across Europe. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily, getting close to Christmas now, 22nd of December today. My name is Martyn Lee. I've been through every EV story I can find. I've picked out the best ones. Between you and me, I thought that maybe this time of year it would get quiet. The podcast would maybe be a couple of minutes. I'll just say hi, give you the headlines, and that'll be it. Holy moly, it's so busy. So much amazing news coming out before Christmas, and so many reasons to round off 2018 with so much positive EV news. That really has been the defining thing about this year. Before we get into the news, thank you to the team at myev.com. They've had a busy year as well, building the world's first peer-to-peer marketplace for buying and selling electric cars and learning about them as well. You can research, you can learn, you can do all that kind of stuff, and when you're ready, you can either buy an EV, or maybe it's time for you to move on and move up and sell at myev.com. Welcome to 3 new patrons of the show as well. If you didn't know, by the way, we get to make this show for free for you because of a handful of people. Well, more than a handful these days. We're almost at 150. And thank you very much to you for adding your names to the list. Ken Morris. Well, $5 a month blows my mind, but Ken has decided to double it. He is now an executive producer. He's up to what he was supporting with. Thank you, Ken, so much. He joins fellow executive producer Jason Fan. Thank you, Jason. And MICHAEL Adey as well, a new supporter of the podcast. Ken and Jason and Michael, thank you so much for being supporters on patreon.com/evnewsdaily. Kicking off with a tweet today from Renault ZE. By the way, ZE in Renault terms stands for zero emissions. You probably knew that, but just in case you didn't. Their Twitter account, Renault ZE, tweeted this: yet another milestone reached. Group Renault has hit their goal of 200,000 EVs sold. Bravo! And congratulations to everyone involved in Renault's success story with EVs. And congratulations to everybody working at an energy company here in the UK called OVO. I saw them tweet a few moments ago, following the unveiling of the world's first widely available domestic vehicle-to-grid charger earlier this year, in April, which was when we got the news that charger was going to be available. OVO, the energy company OVO, can confirm today they have successfully installed the first charger in a customer's home. Now, obviously, the customer has to have a CHAdeMO car, well, in other words, a Nissan Leaf. So their very first customer has got a Nissan Leaf. CHAdeMO is bidirectional, and the first vehicle-to-grid charger that they're installing is now in place, and I gather that is part of a scheme, a trial, a test that's being done. Man, if you're involved in that, I'd love to know. Let me know. Get in touch on the podcast and I can pick your brains on it if you're allowed to talk to me about it. Obviously in confidence if you've signed some sort of agreement to say that you won't. However, I would love to be part of that, but sadly with the old Renault Zoe sitting in the driveway, well, that's not going to be any good for vehicle-to-grid. This is interesting. You know, I kind of am obsessed with vehicle-to-grid. I think it's got so much possibilities, even though it still seems in its infancy. I'll put a link to that press release from OVO, which was sent to me in the show notes. Now, here is a weird story. I can't get my head around it yet, but there's got to be a very good reason. I think this is quite big news, actually. The Hyundai Kona has been a bit of a game-changing car for many people. 64 kilowatt-hour battery, around 300 miles, maybe 260, 280 on the various EPA tests and WLTP. Coming to the US, coming to the North American market as a 64 kilowatt-hour car only. They do make it in 39 kilowatt-hour flavour, which isn't as popular. Even in the UK, here in Europe, the bigger battery one has been very popular. 11-month waiting list for it now here, where I'm recording. In America, it is coming in the new year, but with a different specification, and it's been a real head-scratcher for me today. Inside EVs broke the news that the Hyundai Kona electrics are not going to have active thermal management on the battery. It came as a surprise to many people. The Konas that have been delivered already across Europe in their home market of Korea, they all have active liquid thermal management on the battery. Keeps it nice and toasty warm in cold conditions and cool when you're trying to do a couple of rapid charges and a long journey. According to Tom Maloney, writing for InsideEVs.com, our friends at Electric Revs have posted a comprehensive article on the Kona's thermal management, and for those that are destined for the US market, they seem to think the Kona will not have any kind of active battery warming feature as found on the ones that are sent in to the rest of the world. They also seem to confirm the Kona's electrics that are sent to Canada, well, they will have battery warming. And the Kona is a lot of car for not a lot of money. It comes with a heat pump as well, and a bit like I mentioned the Zoe already, I think that comes with some form of heat pump, which is incredible for such a cheap car. Often it's a £1,000 or £2,000 or dollar optional extra on many cars. The heat pump is seen as a bit of a luxury, but on the Kona, I gather it comes with the heat pump, but not again for the US. The only thing that I can think of is saving money. Maybe they were so obsessed with getting the price really, really nailed down in the US market that they decided not to put that technology into the cars. But surely, I don't know. I mean, the batteries are from LG Chem. Surely you make the pack. All of the active liquid thermal management is part of the pack. I don't know how it's built. But you would think that liquid cooling and heating would be so integral to the battery pack that you couldn't just leave it off for a certain market. That does seem to be what's being suggested. I will add, this isn't an official confirmation from Hyundai or any of their engineers. I would love to see that in a statement from them. It's just, of course, been worked out by people who are incredibly up on the subject, so you've kind of got to go with it. It's a real head-scratcher. It seems like they're putting one hand behind their back intentionally. Of course, there are many bits of the US with a temperate climate where the batteries are always going to be, 10, 20 degrees Celsius, and they're always going to be in that nice working range. But there's going to be plenty of places that are very hot, very cold, and we've had the problems with the early Nissan Leaf batteries in those hot states where the batteries were degrading. I'm not saying the same thing's going to happen again, but you've got the technology. It's in the cars already going to Canada and Europe and the home market of Korea. Why leave it off the US? It seems weird. It almost seems too weird for this story to be true to my tiny, tiny brain. Okay, well, we'll keep following that. Moving on, here in Europe, Aldi, which is a supermarket chain, and E.ON, the energy company, are going to build EV charging stations at 123 supermarket stores, the Hungarian units of the German discount store, Aldi, or Aldi, however you choose to say it. And the German utility company E.ON is going to be putting in EV charging stations in the parking lots of 123 supermarkets around the country, and they have vowed to include charging stations at most stores built in the future. Here in the UK, for instance, I think it's the pod point chargers you can quite commonly find in those car parks. I've got one about 5 minutes down the road from me. Well, an Aldi, that is, but it hasn't got any EV charging in the car park, which is a bit of a shame. Another company that I've talked about much on the podcast, mainly because I'm worried about them. I'm sure they're big boys and girls. They don't need me worrying about them. But this EV shake-up that we're going through, this whole reimagining of what the car and mobility market will look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time, there will be some winners. Inevitably, there will be some losers. We hope that everyone is a winner. I don't think this is a binary game that for one person to win, another has to lose. I think lots of people can win. But it does seem like there's going to be a couple of companies that get left behind, maybe bought, maybe merged. Mazda, for instance, one of those that said there is a rich future in engines and combustion and fossil and their rotary engine, the Wankel engine. They are moving forward with that technology as a range extender technology, just as BMW are getting rid of range extenders and going full BEV. Well, now Mazda in Europe plans to offer fuel-efficient full electric and hybrid models to avoid, the only reason they're doing it, by the way, is to avoid big fines which are coming from 2020 based on CO2 emissions of your fleet of cars that you sell. Mazda's answer to the challenge is going to include some mild hybrids, and also Mazda Europe CEO Jeff Guyton Ghosn discussed the company's strategy with Automotive News Europe correspondent Andrea Mallon, saying that by 2020 there will be some plans for a full battery electric vehicle announced. Okay, let's move on. Move on to a company in trouble at the moment. That would be Nissan and their former chief, Carlos Ghosn. Japanese prosecutors have rearrested Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, on fresh and more serious allegations of financial misconduct, dealing a blow to the car titan's efforts to end his month-long stay in jail, seeking bail. The story was that he was going to be out by this weekend, and then I imagine there would be a press conference or something, I don't know, where he attempts to clear his name, give his side of the story. He insists, not that we've heard from him, because he has been serving under arrest. In that legal system, you can keep rearresting people, it seems, as more I read about this, and then you get more time with them, locked up behind bars. Prosecutors raided Carlos Ghosn's residence in Tokyo today in search of evidence, according to the TV broadcaster, the Asahi. They reported the Tokyo prosecutor said the fresh arrest was based on suspicions that 10 years ago he shifted personal trades to the automaker to make it responsible for about $16.5 million in appraisal losses, and inflicted damage on Nissan by having it deposit about $15 million on 4 occasions from 2009 to 12 into a related bank account. These stories just keep coming out, and of course we report it on the podcast because he has been a big fan of EVs, of pure electric cars, the man behind the Nissan Leaf, the man behind the Renault Zoe, and certainly in companies like Nissan, a reminder, the Japanese government have their hydrogen plan. They want Honda and Nissan to get behind hydrogen rather than full battery electric vehicles. He seemed to be such a powerful figure in Nissan. He could move the company forward and make great cars like the Nissan Leaf. And there's all sorts of other politics and things shaking out and at play now. And it'll be very interesting to see where that company goes in the future, along with the Nissan or the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance, as it is. Well, moving on to talk about Tesla, and I got a couple of tweets today. It's such an honour as well to have listeners of the podcast all around the world, but in Europe, when something happens, send me the news. It is, I normally have to go looking for the news, and then people are bringing it to me, which is amazing. Electrek have reported that several Model 3 reservation holders also contacted them from Europe to confirm the configurator is now open for the Model 3. Germany, Denmark, Finland, Italy, the Model 3 long-range dual motor all-wheel drive and the Model 3 performance version are the only two options available in Europe. In Germany, by the way, I saw a screenshot. Prices starting at €55,500 and €66,000-ish. Respectively, with VAT. I'll put a link to the Electrek article in the show notes. Moving on to slightly larger vehicles now, with the handover of the first fully electric Freightliner EM2, Daimler Trucks today have started the day-to-day operation of heavy-duty testing on their big and medium-duty e-trucks in the US. Today, Daimler's subsidiary, Daimler Trucks North America, handed over the very first medium-duty all-electric Freightliner to their US customer, Penske Truck Leasing in LA. Penske Truck Leasing is going to operate the electric trucks in a local distribution traffic network in the Northwest Pacific and in California. Those tests underway. They'll learn a lot and then be able to iterate on that, learn those lessons, what goes well, what goes less well for their next generations of electric trucks. And finishing off just today with a little motorsport story, I was listening to the Autosport podcast. Autosport, of course, the famous magazine here in the UK and website, and maybe you subscribe on their website to get the extra stories as well. And they cover Formula E so well at Autosport. Great podcast to subscribe to, by the way. My weekend recommendation is to download that. They have their little post-race podcast about Formula E. The season opener was last weekend. And Alejandro Agag, the current CEO and soon-to-be chairman as he moves onwards and upwards in the series, has said that increased power is among the minor changes that Formula E is considering making to this new attack mode following the season opener in the Adria circuit. According to Alex Kalinokis, I almost said his name there without stumbling, and I thought too much about it, writing for motorsport.com, the first iteration of the attack mode, which the FIA are able to change, by the way, for each race, was 2 sets of 4-minute bursts of 225 kilowatts of power. Normally, you have 200 in race mode and 250 in qualifying mode. The activation zone was quite tight in an offline spot at the beginning of the main straight. Drivers complaining about the location of it, but also the effectiveness. They're saying, actually, another 25 kilowatts of power isn't enough. You lose so much going offline and going through the sensors for attack mode, that even though you get more power for 4 minutes, it's not enough to then make up the places that you lose. Okay, bit of gamification of the sport going on here, a little bit of artificial massaging going on, which the purists don't like, but I think it added a real interesting element to the first race. The only thing that was maybe lacking was explaining it to people who... There was a lot of hype around the new season, the new cars, and the first race didn't really explain some of these new things very well. The commentators, I don't know, did they do any practice? I mean, they're great, obviously they're amazing commentary team, but it was halfway through the race and they were like, oh yeah, by the way, that graphic means this. And I didn't know that. And I'm a nerd at these kind of things. So the average viewer would have turned on, been really confused. The on-screen graphics weren't there. And it was like, what's all this? Activation zones and attack mode? What's all this? So it could have been explained a little bit better with some graphics on screen and some different ways of explaining. I'm sure they're going to get that nailed for the second race. And maybe even, according to Alex on the Autosport podcast, maybe even a little bit more power when they go through the attack mode. Highly recommend that if you're looking for a weekend listen, you choose the Autosport podcast to subscribe to. Well, that's our news today. As I said at the start, I thought it was going to start winding down for Christmas. I thought that these ones would be sort of struggling to find news, but there's so much more I could talk about today. But I respect your time a lot. I know you're busy. We'll keep the podcast at 20 minutes. Thank you very much to myev.com for setting this week's question of the week. Keep your answers coming in. I'll read them out tomorrow. What are your desired realistic specs for a pure electric vehicle in 2019? Stick to the topics of range, price and performance and let me know your thoughts. Email hello@evnewsdaily.com. Go via myev.com, click on research at the top and then take part in the discussion there on the Discuss forums, and you can use the YouTube comments as well. Thank you very much to 142 patrons of the podcast, adding those new names to the list of heroes that make this show happen. 8 more to go till 150. I would love to add your name to the list. To get to 150 would be an amazing Christmas present. If you're interested, patreon.com/evnewsdaily. If not, no pressure, no worries. I'll make the show whatever happens. If you want to get in contact, you can do on all the usual places. The blog is evnewsdaily.com. All the places you get podcasts from. This show has an archive of 333 episodes. If you want to listen to any of those online instantly and for free, hit that subscribe button, then you get them first and free and automatically, and catch up on the socials by searching EV News Daily. In the meantime, do have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.